Hello everyone, welcome to UGC EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Soma Sarkar from University of Delhi. Today's lecture is on forest resources, distribution, livelihood and scarcity concerns. This is from your paper of resource geography. Through this lecture, you should be able to explain the basic concept of forest resource scarcity. Then you will again be able to understand the issues, concerns over forest resource scarcity at global as well as regional perspectives. Then you will be able to explore major consequences related to forest resource scarcity. Now, sir, let us start with what is forest scarcity and why we are worried about it so much. Forests helps in maintaining the balance of global ecosystem and provide a magnitude of services such as shelter, habitat, fuel, wood, fodder, fiber, timber, medicines, security and employment related to freshwater supplies, storing carbon and cycling nutrients, and also helping to stabilize the global climate. Forests have been under pressure due to increasing demand for shelter, agricultural land, meat production, fuel and timber extraction, but in recent decades this pressure has increased, mainly due to the competing demands from agricultural expansion and biofuel production, rapid urbanization and infrastructure development, and of course, the increased global demand for forest products. Forest gains and loss occur continuously globally and are very complicated to monitor even with high resolution satellite imageries. It is so because natural forest and planted forest area vary dramatically across the national conditions and vegetation types. The biggest forest area loss is mainly recorded in tropics, particularly in the South and Southeast Asia, Central and South America, and in all the sub-regions of Africa. An apparent part of worldwide forest estate is as of now assigned for various utilities, permitting for both generation and preservation without prioritizing or organizing either. All around 1.049 million hectares or 1/4 of the timberland domain were assigned as multi-use forest in 2015. An extension, or you can say the expansion from 81.8 million hectares since 1990. That means 8.5% expansion has been recorded in this regard. Expanding interest for woodland and rural items deliberates to undermine the efforts to capture biodiversity decay and keep up the uprightness of the forest. Now, let us talk about the causes and concerns in the developing countries and also for the other developed as well as developing underdeveloped countries. In developing regions, the decline of natural forest was significant between 1990 and 2050. The total loss in the tropics has been greatest in Latin America and the Caribbean, followed by those in Africa and in Asia and the Pacific. The growth of population, industrialization, continued dependency on sustenance like agricultural and related agricultural expansion, followed by forest product trades and an absence of alternative to wood as a fuel in many parts, in many developing as well as the underdeveloped parts of our globe are the main driving forces in dropping forest in this forest region. The rate of deforestation scenario are sad, or rather say gruesome, in some Asia and in the Pacific and in the highlands of West Asia. Increased climatic variability, declining productivity and greater susceptibility to flooding have likewise been credited to high degree of deforestation on the African landmass. In West Asia, the opening up of forest has made greater susceptibility to erosions and land degradation. That means forest clearance is leading towards the erosion and land degradation. Woodland status, rather say forest status, as of now somewhat stable in Europe and North America, as it has been seen from the past century. However, forest in Europe experienced the ill effect of acidification, and mainly in the boreals forest of Siberia are vigorously misused too. Regarding India's forest status, it can be said that though forest cover in India has increased in figures at national level during 2015 assessment, around 2,510 square kilometer of very dense and mid-dense forest has been wiped out since 2013. That means although in general status an increase in forest cover has been recorded, but if we are talking about the dense forest, then in the forest clearance mainly in the dense forest has taken place. States of Jammu Kashmir, Uttarakhand, Kerala, Arunachal Pradesh, Karnataka, Meghalaya and Telangana has suffered huge loss of forest cover. Around 2,254 square kilometer of mid-dense forest cover has been converted into non-forest land since 2013. So, we can see the changing scenario of forest cover in terms of dense and the moderately dense cover forest, which actually helps the local and helps and maintain the local climate of a particular region. The major drivers for forest resource trades can be thus related to the demographic changes. Then what are the causes? Let us check how demographic changes is actually leading towards forest stress. Between 1948 and 2015, human population have nearly tripled. It is predicted that the rise will be continuing. This will no doubt put greater pressure on the remaining forest resources to provide goods and services, because when your population is rising, the need for the services as well as goods will also increase. However, the relationship between the rate of change of natural forest area and the rate of population growth is more a complex scenario now than it was in 1980s and 90s. The main reason for such complexity is due to the increasing dominance of controlling factors of forest expansion over drivers of deforestation, the differential influences of urban and rural population, and of course the effect of time lags. Now let us move on to next stressor, that is agricultural land expansion. How the forest land has been cleared to convert it into an agricultural lands, mainly to feed the increasing population. So, with continued rise in population, it is likely that requirement for alteration of more forest land to agriculture will continue too, unless agricultural productivity increases significantly on existing farmlands. The situation will prominent mainly in the tropical regions. If we go about the statistics of the current scenario, then at present 37.4% of global geographical area is used for agricultural production. As for India, where majority of the population are from rural parts and have agriculture as their main occupation, about 42% of total land area is agriculture. It remains the foremost for rural economic growth. Between 2000 and 2050, global cereal demand is projected to increase by 70 to 75%, while meat consumption is expected to double. Meeting these needs while avoiding a large expansion of agricultural land and protecting biodiversity as well will be a major challenge in front of us. Now, infrastructure and industrial growth are again important stressors that affects the forest. Communication, transport, energy, healthcare, housing and knowledge infrastructure are the major priorities for most of the developing nations, as their main focus is on sustaining the economic growth rates. Since land is the primary necessity, forest clearance has always been the easy way out. With that, we have also known about the special economic zones. So, special economic zones, that is SEZs, and special economic regions are also expected to have strong influence on the socio-economic profile of people in their catchments, leading to the changes in consumption pattern and the way of living, that is standard of living. The agro and rural industry segment depends upon the farm and non-farm productions of raw material, a large proportion of which comes from, of course, the forest products. So, dependency of these industries on the forest products may again lead to the huge exploitation of the forest resources. The next factor is urbanization. Urbanization put forth great stress on ecosystems and natural resources. High urbanization rate leading to rise of consumption rates increases the stress on infinite forest resources. Latin America and the Caribbean is the most urbanized part in the developing world. Africa is as well urbanizing increasingly, although most of the population still remain in rural. The scenario for Asia, Oceania and Latin America and the Caribbean are already largely urbanized, and the migration streams are increasingly international. Regarding United States and Europe, they also have high internal migration associated with labor mobility. Next factor is demand for wood. Since 1990, as the demand for wood has increased, the amount of forest land designated to generate it has increased too. Wood demand has gone from 2.75 billion per year in 1990 to 3 billion per year in 2011. For the period between 1990 and 2015, the area designated for wood production and multiple use has increased by over 120 million hectares. About 2/3 of the total forest areas designated for multiple use are found in the high income countries and only 1/10 in the low income countries. The next important factor which acts as the stressor for the forest resource is of course the climate change. The climate change is increasingly an important and will have a profound impact, particularly in combination with other threats. Alteration or conversion in changes in the precipitation and evaporation are likely to have foremost impact on hydrological regimes, which will have adverse effect on forest health. The consequences of climate change on the monsoon pattern and concomitant natural calamities and their impact on crop production, receding glacier, biodiversity, land degradation, desertification and soil erosion are being debated. The impact of climate change on forest is expected to be in line with the changes in climatic conditions, to be manifested in species composition, profile, productivity, resilience and biodiversity. Say for example, in Arctic, tundra habitat are shrinking owing to tree line advance. In India, with around 70 million tribal and 200 million non-tribal rural people depending on forest resource for their subsistence, for their livelihood needs, climate change will have an impact on their livelihood. The next factor is on political and institutional environment. Meeting expectations of the stakeholders requires major adjustment in the responsibilities and structure of the forest administration. The increasing decentralization of the democratic processes, community empowerment, participation in decision making, increasing intersectorial linkages and economic aspects governing the decision making require urgent development of skills for integrating conservation and ecosystem services in economic terms and support to conservation on the basis of economic imperatives. A long-term strategy will be needed to deal with the challenges of improving governance, accountability and transparency in all spheres of central and local governments, the corporate sectors and the community level. Now let us talk about the consequences that can happen due to the forest resource scarcity. The first consequence should be taken with respect to its impact on the stability of soil. The roots of tree are most essential for conservation of soil. It works as the protection against avalanches and landslides, for protecting coastal areas and the stabilization of sand dunes. So, what will happen when there is a loss of forest or deforestation will take place? The loss of forest will lead to slope instability and make the soil more vulnerable towards erosion by various agents of denudation. Next perspective is on impact on the global climate and pollution. As we all know that forests are also a vital purifier of air and water, so they contain about half of the carbon in terrestrial vegetation that is present as a considerable biomass or the carbon stock in terms of their weight, their density and scale. Forest contributes about 80% to the exchange of carbon between vegetation, soil and atmosphere. Forest fires emit methane, that is about 10% of all methane linked to human activities comes from the burning of forest biomass, and nitrous oxide. These two gases are significant greenhouse gases known to cause global warming of the planet Earth. Scientists accordingly predicts that the pace and the scale of climate change could eventually exceed certain ecological limits or threshold, leading to surprising and dangerous consequences such as the alteration of world oceans chemical composition with increasing proportion of acidifying carbons, the global loss of coral reef ecosystems, or the collapse of West Antarctic ice sheet. Now, what will be the impact on the biodiversity? So, primary forest accounts for about 80% of the land biodiversity. The primary stresses on the biodiversity deals with habitat loss and degradation, alien invasion species, climate change, overexploitation, and of course pollution. One driver can actually trigger a series of drivers and pressures that act in a dominant fashion. For example, concerns about climate change impacts including crop vulnerability and food insecurity gave rise to the policies that induced mandate to increase biofuel production, such as legislation introduced in 2003 in European Union and in 2008 in United States. Now, the growing demand for biofuels has taken a toll, with expanses of forest and natural lands in Southeast Asia being converted into monocrop plantation. Now, let us talk about its impact on local climate. Deforestation causes excessive water runoff, leading to disastrous flooding as runoff is no longer guarded by the plant roots. Loss of forest can change the local precipitation regime of that particular region. The next consequences is on human health. The destruction of forest habitats for many species facilitates the transmission of infectious diseases to human through contacts with mosquitoes, monkeys, viruses and bacteria carrying rodents that are potentially hazardous to human. Now, let us see what recent research predicts regarding the future of the forest. Forest area change differs considerably by region, as we have already learned that. As forest reported in the Global Forest Resource Assessment 2015, the graph shows that the forest area by region is calculated from the data for the period of 1990 to 2010, the projected using the Global Forest Resource Model towards 2050 and extrapolated from the country specific aspirations for 2030 as reported in FRS 2050, that is the largest dots. South America has the largest proportion of projected forest loss, followed by Africa. Forests in all other regions are projected to rise though. It is to be noted that the divergence of Asia and Africa is strongly influenced by the low presentation of reporting countries and changing trends expected from certain countries within these regions. South America and North America have the largest area designated for protection and small projected loss is protected areas. Africa and Asia are projected to suffer the highest proportion of protected area loss, that is 0.7% to 0.9% loss. Sub-regions such as Northern Africa, East Asia and Western and Central Asia have very small protected area with little or no projected loss in areas. Loss is expected in Brazil and Mali, and the gain is expected in China, India and the Russian Federation. On the other hand, Bhutan, Belarus and the United States of America and Iran has their forest area increased over past 15 years, but expected forest loss in the next 15 years. While countries such as Argentina, Indonesia, Nepal, Nigeria, Thailand and Tanzania are expected losses observed in the past to be reversed into the forest area gain. The forests that are under the threat of conversion are clearly the production and the multiple use forest within the tropical regions. The protected forest areas show relatively low risk towards the threat of being converted to other land uses in the near future. Compared to the global scenario, Indian forest sector is facing data related challenges. What's missing from the Indian forest data is indeed an important question towards our action towards the forest management. According to the International Institute of Applied System Analysis and India's Technological Information Forecast and Assessment Council, in India, the serious problem is present not only in forest data quality, but in the use to which these data are put. The sphere of problem areas include there is no reliable assessment of growing stocks of trees at state level. Other deficits include a lack of data on different products from forest and the lack of increment and biomass data. It is difficult to make economic assessment and set policies without quality data and informations on both the tangible and intangible benefits of forest. For trees outside forest, mostly growing on private lands, are a major resource in India. Indeed, about 80% of all timber production in India comes from the non-forest area under private ownership. However, there is no efficient inventory for trees outside forest. Many deficits in the Indian forest inventories are due to the ongoing degradation of Indian forest resources. Experts suggest that the socio-economic development have brought tree and forest management in very large parts of the country to a standstill. Large tracts are devastated within short periods of time, but these degraded areas are not monitored nor are inventories updated. Non-timber forest products are of growing importance, particularly for export aid. There are many data gaps with respect to the production and consumption of them. Moreover, data are not collected in uniform fashion. There is scarcity of many data and statistics on ecotourism either in terms of demand or supply. To develop the forest-related ecosystem, an inventory of areas for potential interest to ecotourism is needed. According to the latest assessment, the forest cover of India is 67.7 million hectares with a growing stock of 4.6 million. This forest cover corresponds to the 20.6% of the India's geographical area, but falls short of national goal, which is 33% of the land area. But how relevant is this goal? Of the assessed forest cover, only 5.6 million hectare is very dense forest, some 32.2 million hectare is moderately dense and 28.9 million is open and degraded forest. Thus, the forest cover objectives need to be combined with quality objectives. It can be concluded therefore that from the whole discussion that the forest resources play a vital role in maintaining ecological balance and to contribute to the multifaceted processes that are accountable for recycling water and carbon. Deforestation, population growth, urbanization, pollution and climate change are all having adverse effect on the forest biodiversity. Forest loss will threaten the process and the system of environment. Therefore, understanding the spatial variation in forest change status, the root cause leading to such variation at regional and global level, there is an immediate need to work towards the sustainable development goals. With this, I thank you all for joining me in UGC's EPG Pathshala. Thank you.